Good afternoon, everyone. This is Clay Chase with Proehl Capital. I'd like to welcome you to the Dermata Therapeutics Zoom presentation for January 15th, 2025. I trust and hope you're all well, having a great start of the new year here in 2025. Happy New Year to everyone who I haven't spoken with this year yet. And we have a really great program for you today. And as everyone knows, we're always on the lookout here for companies that just have a disconnect in the market. They're underfollowed, they're underappreciated, they're kind of left in the sideline and no one's really paying attention. And that's what we'd love to find, because we love to find them before everyone else does, and maybe take advantage of some kind of natural arbitrage in the pricing of these companies. We like kind of look down the road a little bit. You know, what's going to happen in 3, 6, 9, 12 months? What is the company going to be able to complete in that time frame, and what kind of market availability will be there for that product or that service when they're there? And we really believe we've got one that has that kind of that secret sauce, that market disconnect that we're all looking for, and could be poised for some really above average enterprise growth over the next couple quarters, maybe even sooner than that. So, and as always, if you have questions during the presentation, feel free to ask. You can click on your Q&A icon. There's a Zoom on your Zoom taskbar, type in your question, and or you can just raise your hand and we'll turn on your microphone. We'd like to get your questions answered during the presentation. Okay, the featured company today is Dermata Therapeutics. Dermata is a late-stage medical dermatology company, has put together an impressive therapeutic platform for a whole host of skin disorders, and each of these represents very high commercial value and unmet medical needs. And if you're on the call earlier, you heard us talking about some branding. They just got a brand name approved for their lead drug candidate. And if you watch TV at all, most of us do, you see all these ads on TV continuously for all these skin disorder drugs that come out. Skyrizi, all these things are really addressing one main big skin disorder, kind of a psoriasis or acne. And that's what this company is targeting right now. The platform is based on a very solid IP foundation. They have some very key supply chain agreements to source the critical materials that make these drugs. And they're right now progressing their pipeline in the clinic for a couple skin-related therapies. Their first indication is for acne, but they also have drugs that address psoriasis, hyperhidrosis, and also aesthetic enhancement therapy, visuals. Everyone's trying to look younger, and this is a drug that believes it could be matched with the topical delivery of Botox to really improve the outcome of that drug as well. Companies are expecting some key milestones. There's some top-line data coming out for its phase 3 clinical trial for acne in the first quarter of this year, so we should expect some news on that very soon. Dermata trades on the NASDAQ. Ticker is DRMA. Currently trades on $1.38 a share. Has a market cap of roughly $5 million. With us today to discuss Dermata is the company's president and CEO, Mr. Gerry Proehl. Hi, Gerry. How are you today?
Good, Clay. Thank you.
Great. Well, welcome to the program. I'd like to, I'm going to change this so that you can share your screen, and then we'll put your presentation up. Hang on, it just takes a second. Okay, that should do it. And I'll stop sharing mine. And you should be able to put your screen up now, I think.
Okay.
Yep, there it comes. Great, looks good.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. As Clay mentioned, we're a medical dermatology company focused currently on a phase 3 study in acne. I will be making some forward-looking statements, so I refer you to our SEC filings. It's a pretty interesting product. It's a multi-use platform technology. It's a natural product, and it has quite a few different aspects to it, which I'll talk a little bit more about, that allow us to treat not only acne, but potentially psoriasis, and then use it to deliver botulinum toxin topically to treat a variety of diseases and aesthetic uses. As Clay mentioned, we have an ongoing study called STAR-1. It's a phase 3 study in acne, moderate to severe acne. We've completed enrollment in that study, and we expect last patient, last visit the end of February, with top-line results the end of March. We do have positive phase 2B study results, which I'll go over with you, where we saw a 45% reduction in inflammatory lesions after just 4 treatments. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. We've done a proof of concept study in psoriasis with some pretty interesting results. We affect 2 inflammatory cytokines, IL-17A and IL-17F, that have been implicated in psoriasis. So I think we have a good chance of being effective also in psoriasis as a topical application. As Clay mentioned, DMT-410 is using our product. Specifically, you can see these needle-like spicules, which I'll talk a little bit more about, to be able to deliver botulinum toxin topically. And we've done proof of concept studies in hyperhidrosis and facial aesthetics. And I'll spend a little more time talking about each of these studies in a moment. As far as the team, I've been in the pharmaceutical business for well over 30 years. Spent about 14 years in what's now Sanofi Pharmaceuticals, and a large pharmaceutical company. Came out to San Diego in '99 to start a company, Centaurus. I ran that company for 14 years, and in January of 2014, we sold it to Salix Pharmaceuticals for a little over $2.5 billion. Carrie Von Hoos is my chief financial officer. She's been at a number of biotech companies. The largest is Acadia Pharmaceuticals, and it's also located here in San Diego. Maria Munera is my head of regulatory affairs. She was also head of regulatory affairs at Centaurus, where she was able to get 4 products through the FDA and approved. And then Chris Nardo is senior VP of development. Chris, prior to coming to Dermata, was at Allergan Pharmaceuticals in their aesthetic division, overseeing some of their clinical aesthetic studies, and also overseeing some development of Botox or botulinum toxin. As far as our board of directors, I won't spend much time other than saying all of them have been involved with starting up companies and ultimately leading to successful exits. Some of them are still actually running companies. So the markets, certainly acne is the biggest market of all the markets out there for dermatology. There are 50 million patients in the US alone that have acne. About 30 million of those are always currently seeking acne treatments. Most of them are teenagers, and we'll talk a little bit more about the challenges of dealing with teenagers as far as compliance and why we think our product really will lead to improved compliance and much more usage than what's currently being used out there. The psoriasis market's about 9 million. It's a larger dollar market because it's mostly biologics, and it's mostly for more severe patients. We talked a little bit about our product as a topical application. Probably 80% of the patients that have psoriasis have mild psoriasis. So going after mild to moderate with a topical, you can go after a large percentage of those 9 million patients. And then hyperhidrosis, there are about 2 million patients out there that are diagnosed. There's probably a lot more that have hyperhidrosis that have not yet been diagnosed. There's not a lot of good products out there. Botox is approved for hyperhidrosis, but you have to inject in the armpits, and you have to inject somewhere between 15 to 20 injections. So it's very painful for the patient, time consuming for the physician. With our product, we would deliver botulinum toxin topically, so there's really no pain involved. It's very easy to do. In fact, a nurse or an esthetician could do it. As I mentioned, this is a natural product. It's a freshwater sponge called Spongilla lacustris. You can see here what it looks like when it's in the river. It has these chemical components within the sponge that have anti-inflammatory properties. So they block a number of inflammatory cytokines like IL-8, IL-17 that reduce inflammation. That helps in acne, it helps in psoriasis, and potentially other indications. It also has antimicrobial activity. So we test this product in vitro, and we look at, are we able to directly kill C. acnes? And that's what we've been able to find in vitro studies. And the last thing that's pretty interesting about the chemical components within the sponge is They actually inhibit sebum production by inhibiting lipogenesis and sebocytes. Sebocytes are the cells that actually produce sebum, and it's the oiliness that you see on someone's skin, and we're able to block lipogenesis and sebocytes. So really a number of different chemical components that make this product work in acne. It also has these mechanical components, these needle-like spicules. They're really important for a number of reasons. Number one, they create microchannels that allow us to be able to deliver the chemicals within the sponge into the dermis that block then inflammation and block and kill C. acne. They also, though, open up closed comedones. When you have acne, what happens is you get this bacteria called C. acne in your hair follicles. You then have a closed comedone, and those C. acnes grow in what's called an anaerobic environment, anaerobic being without oxygen. When you open up the closed comedones, you actually are delivering oxygen, so it helps to kill the C. acne. And then the last thing the spicules do is they promote collagen production. You actually turn over your dead skin, and it stimulates new collagen production. So what we're seeing is not only are we getting rid of the acne, but we're improving the look of the skin. And one of the things we'll be looking at in this particular study is not only our ability to get rid of the inflammatory, non-inflammatory lesions, but we're also going to look at acne scarring to see if we're able to help improve that. Zingari is a once weekly topical. It would be the first once weekly topical ever approved for the treatment of acne. All the topical products right now are either once a day or twice a day. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Certainly the frequency of treatment is really important. I mentioned earlier, 85% of the patients with acne are teenagers. Most of you can probably assume that teenagers aren't overly compliant when it comes to medications. And if you have to put something on your face once or twice a day, they're probably not going to comply completely with that. Ours is very simple. It's a once weekly application. You can see here it's in a powder. So you open up a sachet or a packet, you pour it in a little mixing bowl, you take 3% hydrogen peroxide, you pour that in there, you mix it up with your fingers, and you just apply it with a couple fingers onto your face. You leave it on for about 10 minutes and wash it off. We tell patients you can do it Sunday night before you go to bed, and you're good to go for the entire week. Easy to remember, easy to comply, and better compliance leads to better overall outcomes. The second thing is time to treatment effect. We know that some of the current topical products, like a retinoid, which is typically the most frequently prescribed topical product for acne, it's going to take somewhere between 6 to 8 weeks before you start to really see an effect on inflammatory lesions. We know, and I'll show you some data here, that our product has a significant effect on inflammatory lesions after just 4 weeks. That's 4 applications. So you're talking about a once a day product in a retinoid where it's going to take you 6 to 8 weeks. That's 40 to 60 applications before you're going to see an effect. You're going to see an effect after 4 applications of our product. The last thing is tolerability. A lot of the current topical products have big problems with tolerability: burning, stinging, itching, skin dryness. We have really good tolerability. I'll share some of that data with you in just a little bit. So the phase 3 study, it's a very traditional study. It's double-blind, placebo-controlled. In this case, we're having a 2-to-1 design. So 2 patients will get the drug, 1 patient will get placebo. And the reason you do a 2-to-1 design, it's a little bit easier to recruit patients because they know that around 67% of chance of being on active drug versus placebo. Recruiting patients 9 years of age or older, very few patients 9, 10, or 11. Most of them as you get into the teen years. That's what most of the patients will be. You have to have an IGA, or Investigator Global Assessment, of 3 or 4. And IGA is on a 5-point scale. It's graded 0 to 4, 3 being moderate acne, 4 being severe acne. So you have to be moderate or severe, 3 or 4, to get into the study. And it's a 12-week duration study, which is required by the FDA with once weekly application. These 3 endpoints: absolute reduction in inflammatory lesions, non-inflammatory lesions, and IGA. And in IGA, you have to have a 2-grade reduction, and you have to get the 0-1. So if you're a severe patient, you're at 4, you have to actually get 3-grade reduction to get down to 0 or 1 to be considered a responder. Those endpoints are the exact same endpoints that we had in our phase 2b study, where we got excellent results. Again, the design of the study was very similar. The only difference between the phase 3 and the phase 2b was the age of the patients. We used 12 years or older. The FDA requires when you move into phase 3 that you go down to 9 years. As I mentioned, there'll be very few patients that are 9, 10, or 11, but it's a requirement by the FDA. Everything else in the study is exactly the same. You can see as far as treatment emergent adverse events, Zingari had 5 total versus 2 for placebo, so very few adverse events. We get a little bit of application site erythema or redness. That's from rubbing the product on your face. And once you wash it off, it lasts a few hours. We tell patients if you're worried about the redness, do it before you go to bed. When you wake up, the erythema or redness will be gone. As far as tolerability, there are 4 things that you typically measure in a topical acne study: erythema, redness, dryness, scaling, stinging, or burning. And I'll point a couple things out. Number 1, you see no severe effects. That's not going to be the case if you use a retinoid. You're going to see some severe effects as far as scaling, stinging, and burning. Second thing you'll notice is most of it's green. Green is very mild, so very mild effect, whether it's erythema, dryness, stinging, burning, scaling. If you compare this to a retinoid, what you're going to find in a retinoid as far as tolerability, they're going to have stinging, burning, scaling in the area of about 40 to 60% of the patients will report that. And again, some of them severe. If you're talking about benzoyl peroxide or BPO, you're going to have dryness in the 40% range. So a lot of tolerability issues. And then, as I mentioned before, it takes 6 to 8 weeks before you start to really see an effect. So you're getting all these side effects, but you're not seeing an effect on your acne lesions. That leads to poor compliance with many patients. As far as efficacy, we had excellent results. You can see here on the left are mean change from baseline. On the right is percent change. And on the top graphs, it's inflammatory lesions. On the bottom is non-inflammatory lesions. I'll point a couple things out. Number 1, at every time point on every way we measured this, we were statistically significant, whether that was at day 29 after 4 applications or at end of study. The other thing I mentioned earlier, you can see here on percent change. After just 4 applications, which is day 29, we had a 45% reduction in inflammatory lesions. What we hear from our investigators, you just don't see that with the current topical products. And that leads to even better compliance because the patients are seeing that they're improving the look of their skin, their lesions are going away, and they tend then to comply even better. As far as IGA or Investigator Global Assessment, of the 3 endpoints, this is probably the most difficult because it's somewhat of a subjective endpoint. The dermatologists, not only are they looking at lesions, but they're looking at the skin. And is the skin looking better? And as I mentioned before, because we cause turnover of dead skin and stimulate new collagen production, not only are we getting rid of the lesions, but we're improving the look of the skin. And you can see this here, almost 45% of the patients got to clear or almost clear. So almost half the patients got to a point where the doctor feels like almost all the lesions are gone. I also mentioned earlier, the FDA has also asked us to look at acne scarring. And so we'll be reporting our effects on acne scarring when we report top-line results. These are 4 of the products that have been recently approved. All of them are topical products. So from Journey Medical, Amzeeq, which is, sorry about that, which is 4% minocycline, Sol-Gel Twin Neo, which is tretinoin and BPO, benzoyl peroxide. Winlevi is a new product, a 1% clascoterone. And then Bausch launched Cabtrio, which is a triple combination product, clindamycin, adapalene, which is a retinoid, and then benzoyl peroxide or BPO. Couple comments here. Number 1, if you look at efficacy, we look very good compared to other products. Certainly the triple combination has good efficacy. The issue with the triple combination is you're going to have really, really poor tolerability because you have adapalene, a retinoid. You're going to get burning, stinging, itching. Benzoyl peroxide is going to dry out your skin. So while you get good efficacy, compliance will be very questionable. If you look at Sol-Gel, they also have BPO in addition to Bausch's product. And one of the things that is currently ongoing, and if you search benzoyl peroxide, you'll find in the news that there's been a number of studies done now that have demonstrated that when benzoyl peroxide degrades, it degrades into benzene, which is a class 1 carcinogen. There have been a number of citizens petitions that have been filed with the FDA requesting that they remove BPO from the market. The FDA is currently working with NIH to replicate those studies. And we would expect some decision here over the next few months on whether or not the FDA is going to allow BPO to stay on the market or remove it from the market. I mentioned Cassiopeia and Winlevi. I'll point a couple things out here. In their phase 2 study, their efficacy wasn't that good, 8.6%. In their phase 3, it got a little bit better. It got up to 18 to 20% on IgA. Again, about half of what our product had. And they're a twice-a-day topical product. So twice-a-day topical product, not great efficacy. But I want to point a couple things out. Here's their out-licensing agreements. And you can see here for the U.S., they out-licensed it to Sun Pharma with $45 million upfront and $100 million in potential milestones, double-digit royalties. The combined effect of out-licensing is about $65 million upfront and the potential for $270 million of milestone payments. I point this out because as a small, obviously, dermatology company, our goal would be as we move through and announce our top-line results for our first phase 3 study is look for a number of partners that would be interested in the U.S., Europe, and other parts of the world to out-license where we would get upfront payments, milestones, and royalties from these deals. So this is a good example of a product that really is a new product, not great efficacy, twice-a-day dosing. We think our product is much better, more effective, once a week, and certainly would look forward to getting some really good licensing deals done.
Hey, Gerry.
Yeah, Clay.
Yeah, quick question while we're still on kind of the data on how the drug works and such with different patients in the phase 2. Question was, why doesn't it work for everyone? You show 44% get down to 0 or 1 on an IgA scale. I guess there's some others who get the delta 1 or 2 better improvement. Is there a reason why it doesn't work for everyone, or does it work for everyone if you give it more time? Or how would you answer that?
You know, like every product it doesn't matter whether it's in dermatology, cardiology, whatever. Some patients are going to respond to products. Some patients are not going to respond to products. When you're talking about topicals, you know, some patients maybe aren't applying it properly all the time. So there's a variety of reasons why it doesn't work for every patient. Some patients have other things that are causing their acne. So there's a lot of reasons, but typically we see somewhere in the 30 to 50% range of patients that get improved efficacy. They get down to 0-1, as you mentioned. You know, potentially some patients, they use it longer, may get down to a 0 or 1. Right. One of the things I'll point out when I talk about DMT-410, which is delivering botulinum toxin or Botox topically, we actually think that we could use our product on a once-a-week application, and we could combine it with botulinum toxin, just one application every 3 months, and potentially get the efficacy up to more like 60 or 70% because of the effect of botulinum toxin. So that's a potential. Sure. We've not seen any products that have gotten much above 50%. So.
Yeah, even the market, even the standard of care that's out there, nothing is, gets everybody better. Looks like yours is an improvement on the current standard of care by a pretty good margin on some of these, right?
Yes, and for a once a week application, it's very easy for the patients to remember.
Right. Great. Thanks.
So DMT-410, what we're really talking about is, remember I pointed out those spicules, those needle-like spicules. They're microscopic. You can't really see them, but they do penetrate the skin. And you can see here, here's a piece of skin. And we stain all of the spicules, or all those little purple dots all over the place. So there are millions of these needle-like microscopic spicules that penetrate the skin. And what they do is they create microchannels. Botox, or botulinum toxin, is considered a large molecule, and a large molecule, or a biologic. And the molecules are too large to directly penetrate the skin. So they're typically going to be injected either into the muscle or into the dermis in order to have their effect. We're talking about actually being able to deliver botulinum toxin topically, where you apply our product and then you apply the botulinum toxin topically. The advantages there obviously are you can deliver large molecules topically, which you can't really do currently. That allows us not only potentially to deliver botulinum toxin, but potentially other large molecules or biologics that may be used now for more severe patients, but they could be used topically for more mild to moderate patients. You also don't have to have injections. Many patients don't want to get injections. I talked before about axillary hyperhidrosis, which is excessive sweating under the armpits. Many patients don't want to get 15 and 20 injections in their armpits, very painful. And so if we can develop a product where we can deliver botulinum toxin topically, it's going to be really no pain at all for the patient. You get broader coverage. I mentioned before, and I'll talk a little bit more about facial aesthetics. When you're talking about Botox, you're really talking about injecting into the muscle, whether that's the forehead lines, lateral canthal on the side of the eyes, or glabella, the bridge of the nose. Those are really the three indications for facial aesthetics. And it's really looking at very deep lines and only in certain areas of the face. What we're talking about is really delivering botulinum toxin to the entire face, where you could really affect fine lines, wrinkles, reduce pore size and number, reduce sebum production, oiliness of the skin. And the last thing certainly is additional uses. As I mentioned, we think not only could be used for hyperhidrosis, for facial aesthetics, but even improving acne and rosacea. So we did a phase 1B. This was a small kind of a proof of concept study. We took 10 patients. We enrolled these patients. We applied our product, washed it off, and then topically applied Botox. And it just got massaged into the armpit. And then we had the patients come back 4 weeks later, and we measured sweat production. And you can see here on the bottom, these are the three things we measured. Greater than 50% reduction in sweat production. 80% of the patients had that. Less than 50 milligrams of sweat, 85% meet that criteria. And change in gravimetric sweat production of 75% reduction. These numbers are very similar to what Allergan found in their phase 3 studies with Botox, where they injected patients with 15 to 20 injections. So we know that we're delivering Botox topically in order to get into the dermis. It then cleaves a protein called SNAP25 that then blocks acetylcholine production, which stimulates sweat production. So we know we're getting into the dermis. We can be used not only for axillary hyperhidrosis, but there's a potential that we could also be used for palmar, sweating on the palms of your hands, and plantar, the bottom of your feet. Botox injections could not be used for palmar or plantar because if you're injecting into the palm, if you hit a muscle, you'd paralyze a muscle in your hand for up to 3 months. So they'll never be approved for injections in either in the feet or the palms. Whereas our product, you could rub our product into the palms and then topically apply the Botox, where it would only get into the dermis to have an effect on blocking sweat production. We also
so there's no risk of it. When you do it topically, there's no risk of it causing any kind of like localized paralysis or anything like that?
No, so yeah, that's a good point, Clay. So in order for it to have an effect on the muscle, it has to actually get into the muscle. Okay, we measured our product, and there's no distal spread of the toxin into the muscle. It only gets into the dermis, and that's as far as it goes. So
Can't get in the
in order to get
bloodstream
into the
and
muscle, you actually have to
Yep.
inject directly into the muscle.
Got it. Yep, that makes sense.
Yep.
Thanks.
We also did a small facial aesthetic proof of concept study. We were really looking at our effect on fine lines, pore size, sebum productions. Up here, I have glabella lines, forehead lines, lateral canthal lines. Because Botox is approved for these three indications, and we were not doing this proof of concept study under the Botox IND. The FDA required that we looked at these three deep lines. But again, to affect these lines, you have to get into the muscle. We had really no effect on these deep lines, so we know we're not penetrating into the muscle. There's no distance spread of the toxin. What was good to see was not only did we improve the look of the skin, so it's called luminosity, or the brightness of your skin in the overall global aesthetics, but we were able to reduce the number and size of the pores. We were able to reduce sebum production, so the oiliness that you see on the skin, and also reduce fine lines. And I'll show you that data here. So here we're looking at pore count and pore area. So the number of pores and the size of pores. You can see nice reduction here, and I'll show you some of the a good example on a patient. And then wrinkle count and wrinkle area. Again, nice reduction here. We do think as we move forward and do more larger studies, we'll be able to do more dose ranging and be able to potentially push the dose a little bit higher to get even better efficacy. Here you can see here, this is baseline here. And then you can see what the patient looks like. You can see kind of here, kind of the oiliness of the skin, the shininess here. And then over here, we show you pore size. And this is using very high-powered cameras to actually look at the size and the number of pores. You can see here, the pore count was 302 on the forehead. And after one application, so we brought the patient back 4 weeks later, you can see here, there's no sebum, no oiliness of the skin, so we were able to reduce the oiliness, so improve the look of the skin. You can also see here, the pore count went down to 100. So that's a significant reduction. There's really nothing currently approved to reduce pore size, and there's many patients, and certainly a lot of females that have larger pores that have to put on a lot of makeup to cover up those pores. So having something to reduce pore number and size would be a real advancement in the treatment of facial aesthetics. So as far as potential uses, I mentioned acne. Because Zingari, if it's approved for moderate severe acne as an RX product, potentially down the road would be considered an OTC product. Typically, products go on the market as prescription, and then after 5 or so years, you might look to take the product over the counter. This would obviously be an excellent over the counter product. We will look to do more studies in psoriasis, more mild to moderate psoriasis. And then, as I mentioned, in our current ongoing phase 3 study, we'll be measuring acne scarring. There's not a lot out there to treat acne scarring. And if we see good results, we potentially could pursue that indication. As far as DMT 400, delivering botulinum toxin, we talked about the facial aesthetics, reducing pore size, sebum production, fine lines, improving the look of the skin. Certainly, as I mentioned, improving the effect on acne, both severe and very severe, reducing acne scarring, hyperhidrosis, and rosacea. So there are a lot of different indications. We could pursue delivering botulinum toxin topically. We also think that we could deliver other large molecules topically for mild to moderate psoriasis, HS, and then potentially even deliver dermal fillers where you would potentially cover the entire face. So there are a lot of potential uses for our product down the road. As far as our overall IP, we really look at kind of a broad look, not only at patents, but how do you protect your product? We've got one issued patent in Japan. It's for treatment of hyperhidrosis. And hyperhidrosis is a big problem in Japan. So this is a really good patent for us. We just received notice of allowance on Zingari for the treatment of acne in the US. And we expect that will be actually issued here in the coming months. And then we have applications that for Zingari, for the treatment of acne, for the treatment of hyperhidrosis, facial aesthetic skin conditions, and acne in use with botulinum toxin. We've also filed patents using our product with other monoclonal antibodies or large molecules, biologics. And then we filed patents using our product with dermal fillers. So we've got a lot of potential patents that will cover our product. We have a single supplier. That's the largest supplier of Spongyla lacustris in the world. We have an exclusive supply outside of where we get the product, which is in Russia. And so we feel really good about this. They've been supplying Spongyla for about 25 years. And so they're a very large supplier, and they can harvest and right now and supply up to 25 to 30 metric tons of product. So we've got plenty of supply of Spongyla lacustris. The nice thing about Spongyla lacustris, it grows in the spring and the summer. It gives off these gemmules that then plant on the side of the river, goes dormant in the winter, and then it regrows in the summer. So it's constantly regrowing. We have really good cost of goods. We expect to have gross margins around 90%. There's really no regulatory pathway for botanicals for a generic. There are obviously regulatory pathways for biologics and for small molecules. Biologics, typically you have to develop a biosimilar. You have to do all the non-clinical and clinical studies. And as we talk with a lot of regulatory attorneys, they've told us it's very likely for botanicals, the FDA would force a botanical to be able to follow a similar biosimilar path, where they'd have to do all the non-clinical and clinical studies. Obviously, we've developed some proprietary analytical methods. This is a very different product. So the FDA is requiring us to develop these analytical methods, which are proprietary to us. And we've also developed a proprietary placebo product. Again, this is a very different product since it's a topical. And so that would all be required for a generic to come on the market. Very unlikely that someone would do this until we're on the market and showing that we're very successful in generating sales. And then, as I mentioned, we always have the potential, if we think a generic might come on the market, to move from RX to OTC. So a lot of options for us out there. So with that, Clay, I'll open up to any additional questions.
Great presentation, Gerry. Obviously, we are very excited about what you're doing in the clinic. That's coming to fruition here over the next couple of months as you complete that trial, the phase 3 trial. If anyone has a question for Gerry, please feel free to go ahead and either type it into the chat icon. You can raise your hand. I've got a couple people with their hands raised right now, so we'll go ahead and start there. Michael, I'm going to go ahead and put your microphone on. I don't know if we answered your question earlier or not, but go ahead, and if you'd like to ask a question, let us know.
Yeah, I have. You can hear me, all right?
Yeah, hear you great, Michael. How are you?
Good, thanks. I have two questions. One is on the deals, and the other one is on the supply. On the deals, and I come across this with mining companies as well, it's like a lot of times you have people say, this inferior product based on data has got this big deal. And why didn't those people come to you on that? How is it that these guys get the deals, or is it, they know somebody or whatever? And the next question, unless you want to deal with that first, I'll come back to the supply question.
Sure, I'm happy to deal with that. So when Levy was able to get these deals done upon getting 2 positive phase 3 results and getting the product approved. So it was a more advanced product. So the Sun could go ahead and then within the 12-month period launch the product. So that's probably the main difference. I will point out one thing that's interesting is I mentioned before benzoyl peroxide that is currently being investigated because it degrades into benzene, a class 1 carcinogen. They got Cassiopeia got these deals done with BPO on the market, and BPO represents probably 20 to 30% of the acne market as it relates to either prescriptions or over the counter. if BPO gets pulled from the market, there's going to be a huge gap in the treatment of acne, particularly because BPO is typically used in combination with other products like a retinoid or an antibiotic. Our product could fill that gap very easily, and because it's a once-a-week topical, could be used either with other topicals or with any oral product. So I think there's the potential for maybe even better deals going forward if the FDA were to pull BPO from the market.
Got it. That does explain the first part of it. Thank you. I wasn't aware of what stage they were. That makes total sense. The second one is on the supply. You said it was a Russian supplier and they do so much. What is that their current supply used for at the moment?
Yes.
And why can't we grow that stuff in rivers here?
So a couple things. Number one, they've been harvesting and processing Spongilla for about 25 years. They sell it in Russia in various forms. Typically, they're going to have gels, ointments, lotions. And the Spongilla in that case will represent about 10% of the product. Okay. And they mix it into gels and ointments and lotions and so on. Ours is a very different in that we're using the entire sponge. And all we're doing is mixing it with hydrogen peroxide, which causes the powder to foam up into a kind of I'll call it a nice mousse that you can apply to the face. So we're using it very differently than what they're doing in Russia. But that's really what they've been doing, is selling it in Russia. They sell it as an OTC product in pharmacies in Russia. But they've been doing it for a long time. You have to be certified and approved by the Russian government to go into the Volga River to harvest the product, because part of the Volga is in a UNESCO protected site. So very few people are able to do this at the quantities that they can do it.
And it doesn't grow.
The second question was about growing it in other parts of the world. Spongilla lacustris will grow in northern hemisphere. So you can find small amounts of Spongilla lacustris, even if you went to let's say, to rivers in Michigan or Minnesota or China. You're going to find small amounts of it growing. It's not always the exact same. So one of the things we know is in different parts of the world, the Spongilla lacustris might look a little bit different, and that goes back to the fact that the FDA is likely to require anybody that wants to develop a similar product to go through all the clinical studies and do all the analysis, because Spongilla lacustris maybe in China may be different than in Russia. It just so happens that the Volga River is extremely large with a lot of tributaries. It's very well protected because the sturgeons swim through the Volga, and obviously caviar is important to Russia. And it grows in very large quantities there. And that's the most important thing, is we were looking for a supplier that could potentially, if need be, they could go up to 50 metric tons of product per year, which would be over $1 billion of sales.
Great. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, great. We have some more questions here, Gerry. Do you have any agreements with any large pharma at this time?
Not currently. I think it's more likely, Clay, that and looking to do agreements, it'll be more kind of smaller dermatology companies that are dermatology focused versus large pharma companies. Just it's unlikely that we would do a deal with a large pharma company. Part of it is you're going to get lost in all the other products they're promoting.
Right.
Whereas if you go to a specialty company that's focused just on dermatology, then they're going to put a lot of focus, a lot of emphasis on commercializing your product.
Like how big is Sun Pharma? That seemed like the main.
I mean, they're a multi-billion-dollar company, so they're not. I mean, they're not a small company, obviously.
But they're not big pharma.
But they're not a
Allergan
or Lilly or someone like that, where you just get lost.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And then, can you give us a kind of sense of what your plans to commercialize the product would be, compete with existing products? I mean, I'm sure you've thought that through a bit.
Sure. Listen, at Centaurus, my previous company, we developed a number of products. We sold, launched 3 products. We had 5 products on the market. We were trending to $500 million in sales, and we hired the entire sales force, the entire commercial organization. It's very expensive to do that as a small company. I don't believe it makes good sense fiscally to do that ourselves. As I mentioned, there are quite a few dermatology-focused companies out there that are looking for new products that they can launch. So we're very likely to look to partner with some dermatology companies where they would provide us with upfront payment, milestones, royalties, and they would actually launch the product in territories that they're focused on. So that really is going to be our approach.
Yeah, that makes total sense. When they already have built an infrastructure of, sales people in the field calling on all of the typical accounts that could use the product, detailing the product with others, that makes complete sense.
It's very good. When I ran Centaurus, we launched our first product, and we were still kind of losing money. When we launched the second product is when we started to become profitable. As I mentioned, we were generating about $350 million of sales. We had about $100 million of EBITDA. So having a second or third product really utilizes the sales force appropriately and gives you the leverage to start to become profitable. And that's what we would think another dermatology company would want to do that already has an established commercial organization, is just to layer on our product as another product they can sell within their dermatology office.
Yeah, I mean, it all makes sense, especially if you get this thing through the clinic. And it looks like, when we look at either a life science or biotech company, we always ask our 4 basic questions. Is it safe? And yours looks extremely safe. Obviously, the no adverse side effects. Does it work? From your data, it looks like it works probably better than what's on the market right now, especially for a once-a-week application. Can you get it approved? With the data you have, do you have any questions of if you can replicate that in a pivotal trial that the FDA would approve your product?
Yeah, so the FDA will require 2 phase 3 studies. This is the first one that we're completing. I think one of the things, because we talked a little bit about Cassiopeia and Winlevi, one of the things we know is because our phase 2b data look very good, and because our phase 3 study is really exactly the same as the phase 2b, if we demonstrate good safety and efficacy in this first phase 3 study, we feel very good that we'll be able to find a partner that will help then fund the company in order to be able to complete the second phase 3 and then get the product approved.
Yeah, it looks like it's pretty straightforward after that. I mean, just replicate it again with maybe a little larger patient set. And then our 4th final question is, can you protect, if it's approved, can the person who owns it, protect it? And the fact that you just got your U.S. patent allowance, which is a de facto of getting the patent, I mean, that's very strong, we believe, in your ability to keep a 15+ year head start on everyone else. Do you have any comments on your IP and your ability to protect it?
Again, I think patents are important. Certainly, the generics are always going to try to challenge a patent, but I think even more so, a typical generic company, they're going to develop either a small molecule or a biologic, right? They can do that in their manufacturing facilities, in their labs. This is very different. You have to find another supplier that can supply at large quantities of Spongilla lacustris. That's going to be very difficult to do. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but it's very difficult to do. And then you've got to then develop a manufacturing process to process this product. Then you have to do all of the technical aspects of measuring a number of things within the product. And then obviously you're going to have to go through all the non-clinical and clinical studies. It's a high hurdle and very unlikely that there's going to be any generics out there trying to do that.
No, absolutely. Okay, we have a couple more questions and then we'll get ready to wrap it up. Kind of some housekeeping here, some great questions. Can you tell us about kind of what's out there in terms of options and warrants? Also, any debt that the company has?
So we do not have any debt at all. We do have warrants that are out there currently, and they're at various pricing levels, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
We had, at the end of the year, we had a little over $3 million of cash. So we will have to raise some additional money, but we certainly expect to have positive clinical results at the end of March. And with that, we think we'll be able to raise substantial capital. We also, as I mentioned, we've been talking with companies about partnering with their botulinum toxin product, and we hope that we'll be able to announce something here shortly where we could have actually got a deal done and move forward with beginning to look at our product in larger studies in axillary hyperhidrosis.
Oh, that'd be great. Now, is there a shelf offering currently? That's one of the questions. We know that, of course. Can you comment on that?
Not currently, no.
Okay, great. And then what has accounted for the decline in the stock over the past year or so? I mean, the stock was much higher, down lower. These things happen. Can you tell us a bit about what happened to you guys?
So nothing negative on the company. Certainly, the fact that we raised additional capital, I'm sure, drove down the price of the stock. It's interesting if you look at the valuation now compared to, let's say, the deals that Cassiopeia had done with Winlevi. We're very undervalued. I'm sure you've never heard that from any other CEO that you're undervalued. But I just think that when you're a microcap company, it's sometimes difficult to get traction until you really make some big announcements. And I think whether it's an announcement to partner with a botulinum toxin company or announcing positive phase 3 results, I think we'll start to see a much better increase in the stock price over the 2025.
Yeah, that's our thesis as well. I mean, like I said earlier in the program, you have to kind of look down the road a bit, kind of see what the future could look like. And the hardest part, the heavy lifting, I believe you have already completed, and that's the drug. It really looks like it works great. It could be a fantastic solution for the 50 million people who are seeking some kind of a therapy for acne at any one time. And a lot of the ones that they're out there right now just don't seem to work that well. And that's why you see so much advertising in the space. Is the stock included? Another question. Is the stock included in any ETFs?
I don't think at this point, no.
Yeah. And then do you have any lines of credit in the company right now?
No.
Yeah, you said you had no debt, so no line of credit, something like that. No. Okay, so that's if you have additional questions, we've got another couple minutes. The code word for today's presentation is Zingari. I think is it Zynggari, Gerry?
XY.
That's right, X, right. Yeah, so Xyngari, but I'll take probably any spelling, but try and get it if you can. But that's the code word, Zingari.
I got a quick one.
We're looking forward to having you on. Go ahead, Gerry. You had a question?
Yeah,
Michael, is that you?
Yeah,
it's
ahead, Michael. Just on the phase 3 study, how big are those two studies, and how do they compare to products that were approved? Because a lot of times the FDA will come back and say you don't have enough people.
Yeah, good point. This particular first phase 3 study has 520 patients enrolled. The next study will be just slightly larger, probably maybe 580 patients. The FDA, they want to see exposure to your product. That's part of the reason for doing a 2-to-1 design, where for every 3 patients, 2 of them are on drug, so you get more exposure. And that's mostly they want to see it for a safety database. And the size of the studies for the products that I showed you before that were recently approved are all going to be in the 500 to 600 patient range. AMZEEQ had to do 3 studies. One of their phase 3 studies did not work. It's not a really effective product. And so they doubled the size of the study, but that was more for efficacy in order to get separation. We don't think we'll have to do that. We think with 1,000 patients, that will be more than enough exposure for the FDA.
Okay, another question here from John. I'm going to go ahead and open up your microphone, John. You'll have to turn off or unmute your mic. Go ahead.
2 things. I don't know how to spell Zingari. Is that Xyngari close enough? Or
yeah, Xyngari. Yes.
What's that?
XYGARI.
XYZ.
There's an N in there too.
Right here. So you can see it here.
Oh, there it is.
XYNGARI.
RIA. Okay, another serious question is, I don't understand Russia being involved in this. I mean, aren't we, boycotting everything about Russia? Or was this going to have something to do with import from Russia? Or maybe I misunderstood that.
Yeah. So since obviously Russia invaded Ukraine, there's been a lot of sanctions put on Russia. It's mostly for I'll call it large products like oil and gas, could be caviar, whatever. There was an interesting article in the Wall Street Journal after all of the things were put in place, and what they found was we're still importing over $1 billion a month of Russian products, and it could be all sorts of things. So even with all the sanctions put against Russia, we're still importing a lot of product. We've continued to buy product and import it every year over the past 5 years with no issue at all. I don't think it'll be an issue for us going forward. Obviously, it's not on the top of the list of things that the government's going to look to sanction. If for some reason it did get sanctioned, we could go through a process of actually getting it approved to get it into the U.S. by going through the U.S. government. And one of our board members had done that with a cancer product that they got out of Cuba, and they went through that process. Since it was a pharmaceutical product, they were able to bring it in, even though there were extreme sanctions in that case on Cuba.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, John. And then a question from Chris. Go ahead, Chris. I've gotten your microphone open. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Going back to the previous question, Donald Trump is threatening heavy tariffs on imported goods. Do you see this as a problem?
I don't think so. I mean, could they put tariffs in place? Yes, he could. Are they likely to tariff things that are, I'll call it, high profile products? Probably. I think it's unlikely that they're going to be significant tariffs on Spongilla lacustris. I can't promise you that, but I don't think so. And the price that we pay for Spongilla lacustris is very, very attractive. Even with tariffs, we would still have very good margins on this product.
Don't you have like 90% plus margins, or foresee a 90% plus margin product now, right?
Yes.
So even if they put a 50% or 100% tariff or something like that, we talked about this before, Gerry, wherein, down the road, it's you or maybe someone else who's licensed the drug, if it's approved, that you could start up another supply chain outside of Russia with taking the Spongilla and producing it somewhere domestically or elsewhere. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, certainly companies have done that. I'll call it a sponge farm, right? Where you would actually look to grow the product. That's not something we would likely do until the product's been launched and it's successful.
Build the market.
So similar to somebody building a second manufacturing facility for a product once they're successful. So something we would look at, but not at this point in time. We don't see a need for it.
Okay, great. Chris, that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. And yes, we could produce that locally. I have a degree in biology also, and it is a possibility if it becomes necessary.
Right.
We'll put it into the Rio Grande or something once we annex part of the country. Well, I think that pretty much wraps it up. If you have additional questions, we can answer them real quick. Gerry, thanks so much for coming on today. Really exciting. And we look forward to having you on soon when you get some data in. Any final comments before we wrap up today?
No, you could probably tell I'm excited about this product. I think, there while acne for some people doesn't seem like it's a real disease, if you know anybody, any teenagers, or even folks in their 20s or 30s that have moderate severe acne, it's a big emotional thing. And the ability to be able to bring a new product to market that only needs to be applied once a week, we think will be a major advancement. You see an effect very quickly. We measured after 4 applications, but we hear from patients and doctors that they start to see effect after 1 or 2 applications. That's a motivator for patients. We think this will be a really big advancement in the treatment of acne. And certainly if the FDA decides to pull benzoyl peroxide, it's going to be a great need out there too. So we're excited about moving development forward and announcing top-line results in March.
Well, great. Well, we'll look forward to having you on then. For everyone on the call today, thanks so much for your time today. If you have additional questions, feel free to send me an email. We can get you on the phone with Gerry. Also, if you'd like to do more investigation on the company, more due diligence, you can do that. Their website has a lot of information. They're at www.dermata.com. And want to wish everyone a great week and Happy New Year again. And we look forward to having you on a future presentation with Proehl Capital. Until then, be safe, be well. Thanks, Gerry. We'll talk to you soon.
Great. Thanks, Clay. Appreciate it.
You bet. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Bye now.